Thank you. My name is Frank, and I'm an alcoholic. And with the 10 minutes that's left before the dance, we'll deal with the truth. Thank you very much. I'm a big fan of central offices. My call for help went to the central office, and we'll talk about that later. I'm glad to be here in Naples. I spend a lot of time here, and I've been coming here since the late 60s, and I've been privileged to run beginners meetings in Fort Myers. I know there's people from Fort Myers who are in various beginners meetings, Bonita Springs, and in Naples. And I'm very fortunate. I'm one of the most fortunate people in Alcoholics Anonymous. This undertaking called the Lamont Oaks Group, which is the largest closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in the world. We right now have just under 9,000 years of continuous sobriety in our group. And we have a beginners meeting. And as of about a year ago, when we stopped counting, we set up 200 chairs in a room on Monday nights just for beginners. And we've been setting those chairs up since 1980. And so far, over 30,000 newcomers have sat in those chairs. And what's really neat about it is if you're ever near Chicago, come and see it. The meeting starts at 6:30, and they start filling up the chairs by 20 to 7, and by 7 o'clock, there's no more seats. And they come sometimes for 100 miles because there's this thirst for recovery. And we don't do anything special there except we tell the newcomers the truth. And some people are offended by the truth. Sometimes people would like to water this down so that in some strange way a miracle will happen and play God. Truth is that I welcome the newcomers. My sobriety date is November 3rd, 1971, and I'm a survivor in Alcoholics Anonymous. Almost everybody that came in 1971 in Chicago that I knew is gone. And I was 1 year sober in 1972, and we filled halls. We filled halls with people. We had an open meeting, and 17,000 people came. And almost all those people are gone. Some years ago, I stood in the second balcony of the Olympic Stadium in Toronto, there in Montreal. And it was a countdown for the World's Conference. And when they got to how many people had been in, they went from every 5 years we have this conference, and they started to count down from the cities. And when they got to my city, which was the first conference that I was in, and it was in Colorado. I don't know how many people the second balcony of the Olympic Stadium holds, but I was the only person standing up. See, if you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, there's hope here. This thing really works. It works 100% of the time. They wrote that years ago, and it's still true. But what they also wrote is you got to do it. You really got to do it. It doesn't work for people who don't do it. And just coming and mouthing the words of Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't do it. Now recently, I read and I reported at a meeting, it stunned people. And I don't know where I heard this. It was either National Council on Alcoholism, or it came from the Mayo Clinic study on alcoholism, or it was Disease Control in Atlanta, published that at the present time, the cure in the United States for cancer is 8 times greater than the cure for alcoholism. You'd say to yourself, how could that be? When you have this wonderful thing called Alcoholics Anonymous that really works, and it works almost 100% of the time. And the answer is that people like me refuse to do it. We refuse to do it. We come, we get special attention. I'm going to tell you a story. I was speaking in Edinburgh, Scotland, no, in Glasgow, Scotland last year. And they came up to me, and it was a wonderful conference. And they put a man right where you're sitting. And they said, would you talk to Paul? Now, the room was filled like this room is filled. And Paul was a good-looking young guy, was an accountant or a dentist or something in Glasgow. And he was 2 days sober. He was 2 days sober. And during my talk, I almost undressed for this kid because I wanted him so desperately to hear the truth as I was taught. And during my talk, he started to cry. He was really crying. He was sobbing. And by the end of the talk, hopefully he was bright. He seemed to be put together just for that moment. So I said to him, I'm going to pick the next sponsor, the next speaker for the conference in Scotland because they asked me to do that. And I sent Bob Bazans, my friend from Minneapolis, and I said to Bob, when you get up in the podium on Saturday night to talk, I want you to ask David to stand up. That was his name, David. Because I said to David in front of all these people, David, next year at this night, I'm not going to be here, but I will have a personal friend of mine here, and he will call you up and we will celebrate your first year of sobriety. And that tape is going to go all over the world that we're making this promise to you. And I said, all I need from you is a commitment. I'll be here. And he stood up and he said, I'll be here. So just a few weeks ago, Bob stood up in a very famous church in Glasgow, said, before I start this meeting, I'd like David to stand up. And there was no David. So he said, did anybody know what happened to David? He said, David was gone in a week. And we never saw him again. That's called alcoholism. That's real alcoholism. I have it. What that means is that for alcoholics of my type, I have trouble living when I'm sober, and I have trouble living when I'm drunk. I have trouble with me. And Rick, was that your name, young man there? Yes, Rick. Rick, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to talk to you. You're going to represent all the people who stood up and had less than a year. And I won't ask you any questions, but I have to talk to somebody. See, all these people here, they got a lot of years of sobriety. They know everything there is to know about Alcoholics Anonymous. I used to know everything there was to know about Alcoholics Anonymous. When I was 5 years sober, I knew everything there was to know about Alcoholics Anonymous. And then when I was 10 years sober, I dreaded meeting anybody who heard my opinions when I was 5 years sober. When I was 15 years sober, I thought to myself, why did you say that when you were 10 years sober? And me said to me, well, because you're only 10 years sober. And when I was 20 years sober, I said, you better stop telling people what you think. And when I was 25 years sober, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm starting to know the questions. I thought I knew the answers. Now I'm starting to know the questions. And now I'm 33 years sober. And I'm older. I don't know if I'll ever get the answers. Because I'm a work in progress. I'm the best me I've ever been, and I'm not finished. I'm not finished. Since you're the representative of the people who are new to Alcoholics Anonymous, I tell you, which is a sad thing for some of us to believe, but you are the future of Alcoholics Anonymous. That threatens people like me. But the truth of the matter is, 10 years from now, most of the people that stood up with me will not be here to stand up. They will have moved from Naples, that's all. They're not going to go anywhere. And it's very important that this thing remain intact, healthy, and the same. And that we don't dilute it in some strange desire to bring them in, and we'll sell it out. It works just fine the way it was made to work. So I'm going to tell you that more people leave Alcoholics Anonymous than stay in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the truth. The reason that is the truth is that people come here expecting something to happen here, and they wait for it to happen, and it doesn't happen, and they leave. If you were in the Lamont Oaks group, you would be taught this. You will get out of this what you put into it. And the first thing you ought to learn about is caring for somebody besides yourself. So if you've got 6 months or 6 days, find somebody who's got less time. And if you think your life is in bad shape, just open your ears and listen to the stories of the people who are walking in, and grab one of them and make them yours. And that was how Alcoholics Anonymous grew. It grew so quickly that people were making 12-step calls after the article came out in the magazine. There were more calls than there were people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and people with 2 days sober were making 12-step calls. And we never had a greater percentage of recovery than in those years. That's really true. I came in 1971. When I walked in at Alcoholics Anonymous, they gave me a book, and the book said there's over 1 million people now sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what it said in the book. And I thought to myself, on November 3rd, 1971, I was the least sober person in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was sober 8 hours. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm on the bottom. According to General Service in New York, right now I represent 99.4% of all the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how I have gone. The percentile that I represent at 33 years is 99.4. That means that everybody, 99% of all the people in Alcoholics Anonymous have right now less time than me. That could not happen if the people that were here when I came stayed. Now, some died, but moving away then didn't work. Doctor, you understand this. And it's not because it doesn't work. It works. But there's a funny thing about how alcoholics of my type think. And let me demonstrate this to you, Rick. Rick, I'm going to just tell a few stories, because that's the language of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous speaks in stories. That's what we do. We speak in stories. And I'm going to give you some parallels. I'm going to give you a few stories, and I'm going to ask you a question. But I'm going to let everybody that's new answer this. If I had a pill that could make you a social drinker, because you see, I never was a social drinker, and I don't really know what it is. But if I had a pill that could make you a social drinker, and what this pill would do, Rick, is you take the pill and you can drink with impunity as a social drinker. No trouble, no divorces, no lost jobs, no arrests, no beatings, either delivered or received. You just drink as a social drinker with impunity. Would you take the pill, Rick? Come on, time to be honest. Who would take the pill? Who's new? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15. How long are you sober?
A little over 3.5 months.
3.5 months. You're going to take Rick's place. I suggest to you that part of what our problem is our problem is definition and understanding of language. And I'm going to tell you that I don't think you take the pill. Because the only way I could say that to you, and maybe I'll let you decide, let's really look at social drinking. And let's see if you'd really take the pill. Here's what social drinkers do. When one social drinker meets another social drinker on the street, he may say to him, "Hey, what do you think? Would you like to stop and have a drink?" And the other person may, underline the word may, say, "Okay." Then they would walk into a bar, cocktail lounge, hotel, whatever, and they would have a drink. And then they'd go home. Why are you shaking your head? That's what social drinkers do. No, not eventually. That's what they do. They have a drink, and then they go home. How'd you like to live like that, one day at a time? If you're really perceptive and you watch social drinkers go to a bar, here's what happens. They order a drink, and the bartender puts a drink in front of this social drinker and a drink in front of this social drinker, and he walks away. Now here's what the social drinkers do. It's just absolutely disgusting. They turn away from the drink towards one another, and they talk. Some years ago, I was flying from Naples to give a talk in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan for Cecil. I don't know if any of you know Cecil from Canada. It's over 89 years now, I guess. I don't know, long time. I think he's one of the most sober guys in Alcoholics Anonymous in Canada. And anyway, Cecil has a nice conference in Prince Albert, and it's in February, and I left here. It was 83 degrees in Naples, and it was 46 below zero when I got off the plane in Prince Albert. And why did I tell you about? Oh, I know why I told you that. To get to Prince Albert, you have to take 4 planes. The last one flies out of Saskatoon. I know it doesn't ring your bell, Saskatoon, but it's quite a thriving community. They have this little airplane that flies to Prince Albert. And on that plane, drinks are free. Well, they're trying to get your courage up to take the whole flight, and I'm on that plane, and there were 2 young men, younger than me, and they were at the seats across, and this person, man or woman, I couldn't determine, offered them a drink, and they ordered Molson Lager, and they served it in this see-through cups. And I once was a beer drinker. And they poured this drink, and it was gold. It was just gold. It was like 18 karat gold, and it had this cloud form and floating on top of the gold. And I'm looking at those drinks, and I thought to myself, oh, just look out at the frozen tundra. That'll be fun. And so I did. But the devil in me made me peek over. And they weren't drinking that Molson Lager. And I turned away. I thought to myself, what's going on here? They were talking about something. I mean, what could be so important? And it seemed like an eternity, and I turned back and I looked, and the cloud was starting to dissipate. It was dying for lack of attention. And I started to get angry. And I'm thinking to myself, you got to go give an AA talk. Don't get pissed at these people. And I wanted to scream, drink it. I guess they were social drinkers. See, when you offer a social drinker a second or third drink, you know what they say? This is really wonderful. They say, no, thank you. I've had enough. I'm starting to feel it. Oh my God. You're starting to feel it and you want to stop. Oh yeah. That's social drinking. I never was, I never could be, and I'd never want to be a social drinker. What excitement is there in social drinkers? They get up, they go out, they come home, they know where they went where they intended to go. The next day they remember what they did and what, I mean, it's crazy. There's no life, there's no juice in social drinking. You know, when I go out, you take my whole life in my hands. I have no idea what's going to happen. There's an excitement in that. Sad. Tell you a little bit about myself, very little. I was a young kid. I was a handsome little young kid, all full of freckles. That's what they tell me. Just a cutie, little cutie. And I was about 7. It's about the earliest I can remember of me. I don't know if I had a 3rd birthday or what my 4th birthday present was or what I got for Santa Claus in my 5th Christmas, but I remember about 7. I remember I heard about God when I was 7. I went to a Catholic grammar school. And I also was told by my father what I was to do with the rest of my life when I was 7. My father was a factory worker and never went to high school, never graduated high school, nor did my mother. And my dad had met a man who was a lawyer, and he was so impressed with this that he came home and he told me that that's what he wanted me to do. And I didn't know what he was talking about, because when you're 7, in the early 40s, none of the kids that I played with knew what a lawyer was. He says, I want you to be a lawyer. I mean, when you're 7 and it's 1943, 1944, you go out and play with the kids. You know what they want to be? They want to be policemen and firemen and race car drivers and quarterbacks. They want to be movie stars. They wanted to be athletes. They want to be stuff. I didn't know what a lawyer was. Also, a traumatic thing happened to me when I was 8. There's a girl that lived 2 doors away from me. I can't remember her name. But one afternoon, we had clotheslines in those days. I don't know if you remember that. And people would hang laundry on these clotheslines. And her mother had hung a blanket. And we made a house out of that blanket. And her and I went in that blanket, and I discovered that day what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I knew that. And I didn't know the exact terminology, but later I found out it was that I wanted to be a gynecologist. And, when I was 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, my father told me that he wanted me to be a lawyer, because he would always say this to me, because he loved me. He said, I want you to be somebody, because he never felt like he was anybody. And he said, I want you to be somebody, and I want you to be a lawyer. He said to my brother, I want you to be somebody, and he told him he wanted him to be a dentist. And I didn't hear right, I guess, because here's what I heard him say. I want you to be somebody because you're nobody. He didn't say that, but I heard that. See, that's part of my alcoholism, I guess. I hear funny. when you say you like her, or you like that group, or you like that candidate, somehow I hear you don't like me or mine. See? And so I heard you have to be somebody, and I don't know how to be anybody. There's no book on how to be somebody. So what happens is, over a period of time, and I don't blame anybody for this, this is my perception. This is my hearing difficulty. I decided that somehow I have to become somebody. And then I learned about God when I was about 7 and 8 and 9. I learned about God from a white lady who was dressed in black and white. And she came in a classroom full of boys and girls, and she told us about sin. And she said there's two kinds of sin. There's venial sin and there's mortal sin. I don't know that this is true or what you heard or know anything about it. And she unfolded an imaginary scroll, and there were 1,000 things on there. And she said, these are all the venial sins. These are like little sins, medium sins. And they were about telling lies and cheating and taking things that didn't belong to you, and on, these things, and I knew I had done them. And I knew I'd done a lot of those things. And I'm only 7, 8, 9 years old, and I'm thinking to myself, that's not good. She says, well, if you do those things, you offend God. And if you do those things and you offend God, God's going to punish you. I remember about 10 one day, she's getting into this real punishment stuff, and she unrolls that scroll, and I know I got all that stuff on there, and I did a lot of that stuff, and she says, you know, that's what happens after you die. You go to a place called purgatory, and you're going to burn, and you're going to be punished. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm 9 years old. How long could I go in purgatory? And she said, you go for 5,000 or 6,000 years, and that seems like a lot of time for lying to your brother. And and taking money out of his piggy bank, and it got worse. By the time I'm 10, 11, one day this woman in black and white came into the classroom and asked all the girls to leave. She said, I want the girls to leave. I thought, this is not going to be good. She said, boys, God sees in the dark. Holy Jesus. I thought to myself, he can't see under the covers. But I knew he could. She started talking about mortal sin then. And you really offend God. And you're really going to get punished. I don't know if she ever said any of these things. I have no idea if any of this ever happened. It's what I perceived and what I thought I heard. And I hold no ill will and find no blame to anyone. But the truth of the matter is, I thought she said, I'm going to tell you about these things called mortal sins, and if you do any of these things, you can die. You're doomed. Go to a place called hell, and you're there forever. And I'm looking at these things and thinking, my God, those are wonderful things. Here's one about somebody else's wife. I'm not even married, but I know I want to do that one. At least once, and later I found out once is not enough. So you see, by the time 11 or 12, I got a hole in my gut. It's called guilt. And you don't tell people about your tense in the middle of the night and your guilt. See, I thought everything that had to do with normal, sexual, juvenile, experimentation, in inquiry was some deviant, silent, sick secret. Nobody ever told me that. Just like nobody ever told me men don't cry. That's what I heard. That's what I thought was true. And so I spent the rest of my young life trying to deal with guilt and a feeling of dirty. And when I took my first drink of alcohol, I felt clean. Alcohol washes the feeling of dirty away for people like me, because I'm one of these alcoholics that when I drink, something very special happens. I escape me. Sometimes for an hour, sometimes for a day, sometimes for a week, but I am not me. I am who I want to be or should be or could be or wish I were. I'm one of those guys that Bill Wilson describes when he described how he took his first drink when he was 21 years old. And he described it in Alcoholics Anonymous literature. He said, instantly the world changed. I felt that drink go to every single part of my body and soul. It changed how I looked and how I felt, how you looked and how you felt. And he said, the day I took my first drink, I realized that the chains that bound me all my life had been loosened and I was free of them, and I found freedom. And that was his description of his first drink. I didn't quote it quite correctly, but I didn't cheat. And that's how it happens. You see, alcohol does something very special for me. Alcoholics are my type that it doesn't do for other people. One day in 1962, I walked into a class of beginners, the most famous class of beginners in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. There are 42 of them. It was the class of 81, 82, we called them then. We didn't know they were going to be so famous. You're from the class of 2004. Yeah. You're from the class of 2001. You've heard the story about the class of 81, 82. Here's what I said to them. I said, you know, we're all together in this thing, you and I, but we've got to know what we're talking about, and we're going to talk about alcoholism. And there's no definition for alcoholism in any of the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when we talk about it and we don't realize what we're saying, we have to know. If I'm saying cow and you're thinking horse, we're not talking to each other. We're talking at each other. So I said, I want you to tell me what an alcoholic is, and none of them knew. None of them raised their hands. And I asked them this. I said, look, if you don't know what an alcoholic is, and I don't know what an alcoholic is, why don't we make an alcoholic? Why don't we make an alcoholic in the laboratory of our minds? And they looked at me like I was nuts. I don't know the first time I did that. You were in Bonita Springs, weren't you? And the first time I did that for you, you probably thought, this guy's Wax City. I mean, he's got to be nuts, because I held up an invisible test tube. Remember that? I said, I got this invisible test tube. And I said, now, from your experience, you're brand new, Rick, to Alcoholics Anonymous. What would you have to put in a test tube if you're going to make an alcoholic? And I stood there in 1981 in front of those 42 people. And nobody raised their hand. I said, all right, now what I'm going to do is hold this very heavy invisible test tube for 30 minutes, and we're going to be silent for all that 30 minutes. Then I'll adjourn the meeting. We'll all go home. You want to ever threaten newcomers? Threaten them with silence. They can't stand silence, because then they start hearing the voices and the trains come in and out, and they're looking at their watch every 2 minutes. When are we going to get out of here? Maria, where are you? Where's Maria? Maria, this girl that in 1981 was 16, 17. She said, put in fear. And a guy who was 60 years old and sober a week said it put in depression. Then somebody said, put in inferiority. And someone said, put in superiority, as if inferiority and superiority both could live in the same vessel. Put in anger, somebody said. Somebody said, put in lowliness. Somebody said, put in ego. Somebody said, put in perfectionism. Someone said, put in self-hatred. Someone said, put in self-loathing. Someone said, put in anxiety. They said, what did you say? Do you remember what you put in? Shame. Doc, what did you put in? Hopelessness. A feeling of filth. Remorse. And guilt, someone said. Put in a lot of guilt, someone said. Someone said, put in secrets. Put in secrets. And it went on and on and on and on, and people just fill that like you did, and Maria back there did, and everybody else that's from the beginners' meetings. And you know what they've never done, and I've gone all over America and all over North. I've been in every province of Canada giving any talks, and in Europe, and no one's ever put in alcohol. Because they know, and we don't know they know. They haven't read the book, and these people, brand new to Alcoholics Anonymous, know the truth. Alcohol is but a symptom of the problem, and they know it. And when they come in, what do we talk to them about? Drinking, 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 and drinking. And if that was the case, you would wonder, why in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, nowhere does it say do not drink. Not one time in any AA literature does it say do not drink. The only thing it says in the book about drinking is if you're not convinced, drink. Try some controlled drinking. That's said in the big book. That's what they say. Just drink. Keep trying. Drink. Try some controlled drinking and try it more than once. And when you're convinced, come here. Come here. And then you'll be able to admit that you're powerless and you don't want to live this way anymore. That's what it says in that book. And that's what they did in that. So I said to him, you know, you didn't put in alcohol. I said to you guys in Fort Myers and you in Naples, I said, put in some alcohol. And here's what you reported to me. And that's when I knew what an alcoholic was for sure. We started to put alcohol in the test tube that these newcomers had made. And as we poured it in gradually, here's the miracle we observed. For alcoholics of our type, not everybody's type, and maybe not your type, but of alcoholics of her type, and my type, and Maria's type, and many other in this room, if you put alcohol in the test tube, because I am the test tube, and all the things that are in that test tube I carried into Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't tell people that. I sat at country club bars, and when they say, how you doing, Frank? I'm just doing fine, and how are you, and how's Mary? You don't walk in and say, I'm full of fear. Let me tell you, I'm still guilty about what I did in 7th grade. Alcohol put in the right amounts over the right period of time dilutes everything that's in the test tube. The right amount of alcohol makes guilt goes away, fear goes away, depression goes away, anxiety, and that's why I drink. I do not drink to hurt people. I do not drink to make my wife cry. I do not drink to make my children run into the bedroom. I do not drink to defame myself, to degrade myself. I drink to dilute what is in that test tube. And what they taught me in these experiments in the laboratories of our mind is that if you keep that process up for some people, not for everybody, but just some people, alcoholics of my type, if you keep drinking and drinking and drinking, so that this effect will occur, some of us will find out that at some period in the process when we keep drinking, the drink will no longer dilute. And what people like me do when the drink does not dilute anymore, we drink more. We drink more. And if you're like me, and alcoholics of my type, and you continue to drink more after it doesn't work, a new phenomenon occurs. Now the drinks you drink not only don't dilute what's in the test tube, it intensifies them. So if you drink like I drank, past the time the drinking didn't work, I knew a new depth of self-loathing. I had many more secrets. My sense of being broken was a burden, to say the least, but you got to be somebody. So at that time, I was a up-and-coming superstar lawyer. I was making a lot of money. I did some big stuff, and I'm only in my 20s. I remember one day I had a case that was worth a ton of money, big money. Well, Naples, there's no big money. I mean, it's all big money, I guess. At least that's what it looks like on the beach. But I had to go to the country club the night before the trial. So I'm thinking to myself, you're a slick guy. You don't want to get really smashed tonight, because this is a big case tomorrow. And you're on a contingency, and this is a lot of money, big time money. So why don't you just use your head, Frank? I have these conversations with me. And I thought, why don't you drink something that you don't like? That's going to be a short list. And I thought, well, I'll make it even better. Why don't you think of drinking something that nobody would drink a lot of, because nobody does, nobody could. I'm thinking, I know what I'll drink. I'll drink green crème de menthe. So I go to the country club, I have this party, and we do a fine job at the party, and I just drink green crème de menthe. And the next morning I got up, and I went tinkle. And it was green. And my teeth were green. And my lips were green. And I can't go to court green. There's just no way you can walk up in front of that judge, start talking about big money, and be green. Now, why would somebody do that in the night before some big event? I don't know. That's what I do. You see, I'm an alcoholic. To drink is who I am. I drink, therefore I am. And I don't see it the way you see it. And I ask my ladies that come to the beginners meeting, particularly. And I did this in Naples last year, remember? I asked them, did anybody ever ask you, why do you drink so much? Remember that lady last year said, my 7-year-old son, was it? My 7-year-old son said, Mommy, you were there. Mommy, why do you drink so much? And I know the answer. I always know the answer. I've asked this question of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of newcomers. Did anybody ever ask you the question, why do you drink so much? Somebody that loves you. You said, I know you had 3 months, right? Right. You're shaking your head. I know the answer. It could be your mother, your sister, your husband, your boyfriend. It could be your father. It could be a priest. It could be your little girl. It could be your son. I don't know who it is, but somebody that loves you will ask you, why do you drink so much? And I know the answer, and I don't even know who you are. And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. I made my first call to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was, I don't know, 29. I got a recording. I didn't get a real person. I got a recording. And as soon as I realized it was a recording and it sought me to leave a message, I hung up the phone and I took an inventory. Here's how my inventory is. I'm too young to be an alcoholic. I'm too bright to be an alcoholic. I'm too slick to be an alcoholic. I'm too cute to be an alcoholic. I'm too rich to be an alcoholic. I'm too intelligent to be an alcoholic. I'm too successful to be an alcoholic. I'm under pressure, and I have a life that I didn't really pick for myself. But I'm not an alcoholic. So I said to myself, get a hold of yourself. Hang up that phone. I hang up that phone. I got a feeling of feeling good. And I decided I'll do this by myself. And when I'm 32 years old, I called Alcoholics Anonymous for the second time. I got a live voice, and I hung up the phone, took another inventory. By this time, I even was doing better. If you measured it by dollars. If you measured it by human costs, I wasn't doing so hot. When I was 34 years old, November 3rd, 1971, I called Alcoholics Anonymous for the last time. I'll never call again. I can't believe that I'll ever call again. I don't think I could ever muster up enough ego deflation to sit in my own beginner's meeting. I think I'd have to just die. I like to think that way because I don't want to give myself an escape hatch here. I don't want to give myself an escape hatch. And a woman said this, Alcoholics Anonymous, can I help you? And I said, I don't know. I said, I guess, I hope so. She said, what is your name? I thought to myself, I'm not giving her my name. None of her business what my name is. What's she going to do with my name? Who's she going to tell? Guess who called AA today? So I wouldn't give her her name. She says, where do you live? I thought, are you crazy? I live in this big house on top of a hill with a big circular drive. Oh my God, you're going to know my address. And your phone number. I won't give her any information. She said, look, we're not going to get anywhere this way. She said, you see, we're all volunteers here. And unless you give us this information, I can't have somebody come and talk to you. And I need to know who you are so he can ask for you, because he's going to call you on the phone. And I'm going to need to know where you live, because I'm going to pick somebody who's close to you so it'll be convenient for him and for you. And I need your phone number for him to make that call. So I said, okay. I gave her my name, my phone number, my address. She said, how old are you? I said, I'm 34. I'm thinking, well, I bet you that's going to be a new record for a young. That's how goofy I was. She said, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a lawyer. She said, I can't hear you. I said, I'm a lawyer. She said, I can't hear you. I said, I'm a lawyer. On November 3rd, 1971, I thought I was the first lawyer ever called Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how goofy I was. She said, I'll have somebody call you at 6 o'clock tonight. I said, no. It can't happen. That can't happen. It's 9:30 in the morning. I said, you don't know what kind of alcoholic I am. You don't know anything about alcoholism. I said to this lady in the central office. I said, lady, it's 9:30 in the morning. By noon, I'll realize I'm not really an alcoholic because I don't want to be an alcoholic. And I'll make a promise to myself. I'm going to live different. I'm going to change. I'm going to make myself a promise. And then at 5 o'clock, I'm just going to have one drink. I said, I've had this 1,000 times. I know what this is all about. I need help now. She said, well, there's a place near downtown Chicago. I don't live in Chicago. I live in the suburbs. You can go there. There's alcoholics. There was a club, a place where people went. So I did what everybody else does. I pulled out a silk suit, just a beautiful blue. I mean, this suit was really tailored. Boy, God, it was great. And I had this gold pin in those days. This pin here, I blue leather, patent leather shoes. We really had them. I mean, he didn't make that up. In the early 70s, that was in style. And I put a diamond ring on my finger and a gold watch, and I got my new Cadillac, and I drove around that circular drive and down that hill, and I went to join Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm looking at this address, and it's in the city, and I keep driving in the city, and all of a sudden the neighborhood is deteriorating and deteriorating. I'm thinking to myself, what have I gotten myself into? And finally there's this storefront it's like next to a strip joint, and I'm thinking, have I been there before? No. And so I pulled that car, black hat, I think it was a black one at the time, and put it right in front of that window so they could see me come in. And I walked through the door, and a young man with a white shirt and tie said, you need help. I thought to myself, didn't he see the car? Didn't he see the ring? You see how goofy I am when I'm new to Alcoholics Anonymous? I think what floats at the country club will float in AA. No. They don't see the cars. They don't see the girls. They don't see the gold. They don't care about the stories. They don't see the suntan. Here's what they see. They see the fear in your eyes. And there's nothing you can cover that up with. And this young man, saw the fear in my eyes, and he sat down there with me for 6 or 7 hours. And I told him a lot. I withheld a great deal, but I told him all I thought he could handle. And then he said to me, he said, hey, Frank, why don't we go get a bite to eat and then we'll go to an AA meeting? I thought to myself, meeting? What do I want to go to a meeting for? I've been in recovery all day. I want balance. I don't want a meeting. And I said to him, you know what? I got to be home for dinner. We eat at 6 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock. It's going to take me an hour to drive to where I live. I hadn't been home for dinner for years. Who goes home for dinner? It's just her and those 3 kids. It's better off I go a little later. 5:45, I'm halfway there, and I call my wife on the phone. We didn't have car phones. I had to stop in a gas station. I said, hey, Lee, you won't believe what I did for us today, or you today, or them today, or something. I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. She said, we're having chicken. It's on the table at 6, and she hung up the phone. So much for a caring wife. You see, after 10 or 15,000, I'm sorry, give me another chance, don't leave, I'm sorry, I'll change. Sooner or later, they have to maintain the integrity of their minds and stop caring. And she stopped caring. And she said, we're eating at 6, and she hung up the phone. And at 2 minutes before 6, I walked in the door, and I saw a woman who didn't care, the woman I chose for my wife, who I sought, who I said, I will be a faithful and loving husband. And I had said that on an altar 10 years before that day. And I had broken every vow because I got to drink to live. And when I drink, I just do stuff. I just do stuff. And I had 3 kids with computer eyes. Little girls, beautiful little girls. I don't know if you ever see alcoholic children of alcoholics of my type. Here's what they have. They have these little computer eyes. What kind of day did Daddy have? What kind of day did Daddy have? What kind of day is Daddy happy? Is Daddy mad? What about Daddy today? You see, because they never know what Daddy's going to be, which Daddy's going to come in the door. Daddy can come in after he wins a big case or has been flattered by somebody or blah, 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 and say to them, you are my darling. God sent you to me. You're the prettiest little girl in the world. Or Daddy could have gotten hurt, and Daddy could have lost, or Daddy could be in fear, or something happen to Daddy. And he walks in the room, and without any notice, he just knocks you off the chair because you left a shoe in the middle of the living room floor. When those girls were born, I promised that I would be the most wonderful father that any little girl ever had, because I lived in a house that you wondered, what kind of day did Daddy have? I thought, my kids are never going to live like that. No, they didn't. They lived a lot worse. 2 minutes to 6, I walk in, those computer-eyed little girls and a wife that didn't care because she wanted to maintain the integrity of her mind. Sat at the table, and I got the phone call. And by that time in my drinking, when the phone rang and I was full of guilt, I would just get frightened. And the phone rang, and I knew instantly who it was. It was Alcoholics Anonymous. He told me they'd call at 6, and it's 6 o'clock. And here's what I heard. My name is George. I got your name for central office. I understand you got a problem with booze. I said, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I did, but I was there all day, and well, they gave me your name, and they told me to call you, and I'd like to come over and talk to you about it. I'm thinking, come over to my house? How could I do this to my family? I mean, I live in this big house on top of the hill. Everybody sees who comes to my house, and an alcoholic's going to come. I don't know what he's going to be driving, a peace sign Volkswagen or what. I don't know how they come. We got this lovely house, brand new carpeting, white. It's just like, how can I have an alcoholic come in? This is, I'm thinking, right? I don't even have to think. I told you I never wanted to be a lawyer. I never did want to be a lawyer. And in 1993, I walked away from the law business after 32 years, senior managing partner of a law firm, and never looked back. And I never felt like a lawyer. And by some accounts, I was a pretty good lawyer, but I never felt like a good lawyer. But I was destined to be a lawyer because I have a special, unique gift. And that is, under pressure, I can lie with no thought process. You just put me under pressure, and I just lie. I don't even have to think of it. And I said to George, I said, normally that'd be okay, but tonight there's PTA meeting, and I'm going to PTA meeting. Now, this is how wonderful this is. I never been to a PTA meeting my whole life. I'd never known a human being that ever went to. I don't know where it came to me. It comes to me like songs to a composer. Boom, go to the PTA meeting. And he said, what time is that meeting over? I said, it's over at 10:30. I'll be there at 10:45. I said, hey, George, after the regularly scheduled PTA meeting, we have a board of directors meeting, and I'm on the board. What time is that meeting over? I said, I don't know. It's 11:15, George. I'll be there at 11:30. I said, George, you're not going to believe this, but after the board of directors meeting, we have a finance committee meeting or some other meeting. I don't remember what I told him. He said, what time is that meeting over? And I said, I don't know, after midnight. I'll be there at 12:15. I said, George, why don't you just leave your name and phone number, and I'll get back to you when it's more convenient. Now, here's what you got to remember about the story. At 9:30 in the morning, I was so afraid that I would do anything to change my life, even ride to Skid Row. And then I'd walk into a room and tell some kid, some young man, some of the stuff that I have in my brain and in my mind and in my soul. And I would cry in front of him. A stranger. I'd have to walk in front of a stranger, and I was so frightened that I took the risk of telling a stranger that I need help. And here it is just a few hours later, and I'm asking help to leave its name and number. That's called alcoholism. He said, listen, goof. I got a couple questions for you before I hang up on you. What are your questions? He said, I remember this. He also told me I disgusted him because I was a liar. Now, how did he know that? He said, what are you, somebody famous? I said, yep. He said, so are you somebody important? I said, yep. He said, what are you, a lawyer or something? I said, yep. He said, listen, famous, important lawyer. I'm a lawyer. They gave me your name and your address and your phone number and asked me to call you. I've practiced law for 15 or 18 or 20 years, 5 miles from where you live, and I never heard of you. And I said, when are you coming? He said, I'm not coming because you're not worth it. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous, newcomer. He said, if you want to talk to me, you come to my house. And I said, where do you live, George? He said, I live in Beverly Hills. And he gave me the address. And 15 or 20 or 30 minutes later, I parked that car in front of his house. And I walked up those stairs and I rang the bell. And this little guy answered the door, Frank. And I said, yes, sir. Wait there. And I waited there in the darkness. And he took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, my sobriety, November 3rd, 1971. A few months later, we're in a restaurant. He said, hey, you ever wonder why I didn't let you in when you came to my house? I said, no. But why didn't you? He said, because we just got new carpeting. You think that's podium flash? Think I made this up? You think it didn't happen exactly this way? It was worse, because he swore and he said a lot of bad words to me. And he saved my life by telling me the truth. You're a liar. There's George. Stand up, George. And some years later, when George was drinking again, I walked into a store I'd never been before in my life to buy a package of cigarettes. I'd never been in that place in my life before or since. And when I turned around, George walked in. And George had been on a 2 or 3 day drunk. He had never gone home. He was wearing the same clothes. And he was a very famous, big shot lawyer. And he said to me, Frank, I need help. And I said, George, come to a meeting with me. And on our way, I told him what he told me on November 3rd, 1971. And I am now his sponsor. And George is sober 26 years. If you're new, this thing works. If you remember nothing that you heard here tonight, remember this. There is hope here, but you got to work for it. Every promise AA will ever make you. It says, all these things will come to pass if you will work for them. This is the only disease that the person who has it demonstrates no enthusiasm for recovery. People who have cancer immediately schedule chemotherapy and radiation. They have their breast removed. They have whatever it has to be done. You know why? Because they want to live. If they have AIDS, they say, when can I start the regimen? When can I start taking the medication? I'm ready now. Because they want to live. And they trust that there's a better life. In alcoholism, we say, your hair won't fall out, we won't burn your skin, you won't throw up. There's just 12 little things you have to do. First of all, you got to just surrender. And you got to really know, I don't want to live like this anymore. And then there's just a few little things you got to do. And what we recommend is when you go to bed tonight, say, hey, God, thanks. Thanks for my life. Thanks for today. And when you get up in the morning, they say, why don't you just do something simple like this? Hey, God, I'm going to need help today. Hey, God, give me some help. That's all. And then learn to care for another human being. When I knew Alcoholics Anonymous was working for me, is I was sitting in a meeting, and I'm going to shut up soon. I've talked too long. But I tell you, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I sat at a meeting one day, and I finally realized for the first time in my life when I heard a woman crying across from the table, and she was talking about something very terrible that happened in her sober life. And I knew it broke her up. And I felt her pain the first time. I really cared. I didn't even know who she was. And until that time, I sat in Alcoholics Anonymous, and all I thought about was me, and what I wanted, and what I needed, and what my problems were, and what my needs were, and what my dreams were. But that day, in a split second, I felt her pain. And I thought to myself, driving home, something's happening. We don't need to love each other. We don't need to like each other. That's what's not important. It's not important that we love each other or like each other. What binds us together is that we need each other. You, brand new. Jack there with 34 years. The man there with 41 years. We need each other. It's an imperfect place, this Alcoholics Anonymous. It's an imperfect place with imperfect people. And you can find a lot of fault about Alcoholics Anonymous. And if I asked to make a list of all the things you don't like about Alcoholics Anonymous, your list and my list may be a long list. But it's balanced very simply by a simple statement. It works. Now I'm going to tell you one thing, and I'm going to shut up. You're going to hear about God in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what he looks like or what you think or anything. It's not my business. It's God as you understand him. But I tell you something, I think there is a God. I really do. And I think if there is a God, God has to not have prejudice. God has to think of all human beings as his children. It's got to be. He couldn't be God and like somebody more than somebody else. How could he do that? God's got to be, if there's a God, it's got to be perfect love. It's got to be love of a mother to a child. It's got to be the voice of that woman whose son is being executed as a serial murderer, and she said, but Johnny's a good boy. That unconditional belief in the beauty of humanity, God's got to have that. And then you hear in Alcoholics Anonymous, there but for the grace of God go I, when somebody dies or kills themselves or drinks themselves away from Alcoholics Anonymous. I think to myself, what kind of God could that be? It can't be. So I never say that there but for the grace of God. I think this. I think in God's love for his children, God gives every human being the same amount of grace. Everybody has had moments of grace when they know. Then why does sometime you make it, you don't make it, you stay sober for 5 years, you kill yourself after 3 years, you only come to meetings for 2 weeks, then we never see you again, then you stay for 55 years? How could this be? What's the thing that, what's the secret ingredient? I think it's this. I don't know. I think today it's this. God gives us all the same amount of grace. He's brought us today together. This group of people will never meet again in the history of mankind. We will never, ever meet again. This group of people will never, that's how unique every moment of our life is. This group will never, ever meet again. Never again. But the magic of this is simply this. Why do some people make it and some people don't? If God gives us all the equal amount of grace. Some people accept it and act upon it, and others just say, I'll think about it. Thank you.